Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today, taking time out of your day to join our webinar and hear about the 7th edition Energy Efficiency in the Southeast report. I'm Amy Raw, Communications Director for Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, or SACE, and just wanted to share a couple of quick housekeeping notes before Steve and Maggie and Eddie take it away. We have left time towards the end of the presentation for questions and answers. So please post your questions in the Q&A box. You'll find the link at the bottom of your screen. We will be tracking those there and answering as many as we can in the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. And if you're with the media, please note that with your question as well. We are also recording the webinar, so we will send out a email with the recording and a link to the report, as well as a companion blog post and any other resources following the presentation. And with that, I will pass this over to, we have Dr. Stephen A. Smith, our Executive Director, to provide some context, as well as Maggie Schober, our Research Director, and Eddie Moore, our Decarbonization Director. All right, Steve.
Great. Thank you, Amy, and thanks everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, commonly known as SACE, and we're a nonprofit that promotes responsible and equitable energy choices that ensure clean, safe, and healthy communities throughout the Southeast. For the last 40 years, SACE has really focused on reducing the environmental footprint of how we produce and consume energy, which is fundamental to both the human health and the environmental health of our natural world. So let's go ahead and advance to the next slide. Somebody advance the slide. There we go. So I'm going to take a moment here for just a little editorial comment. In my 60 plus years, of which 40 plus have been politically attuned and aware, I have never experienced an administration that is as hostile to environmental protections, as dismissive of scientific facts, and as motivated to mislead the public about issues of their interest as the current administration. And where this manifests most directly is in the current administration's position on climate policy and the fact that they are trying to gaslight us into not believing our lying eyes about the cascade of environmental disruptions that we are experiencing in real time, not only in the Southeast, but across the world. And this request for us to ignore our own experience and to deny the scientific physics of climate change is a very, very destructive path that we are on. And so the climate crisis is real. We are experiencing it in our region in real time, and we know exactly what we need to do to correct what are the underlying causes of radiative forcing, which is adding more energy to the atmosphere and bringing forth the manifestations that we're seeing in heat waves, hurricanes, extreme weather events, floods, fires, and the other things that we're seeing. So I encourage you in a time of lots of misinformation and disinformation to not lose your focus and to not ignore what you're experiencing in the real world. Reality still matters as far as people are trying to recreate it in different ways, but it is still there is still a consensus reality that is based in science, and we need to keep our eye on that. Next slide. So related to choices that we're making, we are in an energy affordability crisis. We're seeing energy prices that people are paying in real time have gone up dramatically. And we believe that this is an issue based on a number of contributing factors. And the best thing for customers to do is to be aware and to be tracking how the decision makers that are behind what are largely monopolies in the way that electricity is delivered to us, holding those monopoly structures accountable, holding those that are supposed to regulate them, and make sure that the decisions that are being made are actually being made in a way that actually protect customers and allow customers not to be literally squeezed by energy affordability. And we can see that compared to other commodities, while we've gone through a period of extreme inflation over the past 5 years or so, much of that inflation is dissipating, but actually the price relationships with energy continues to go up. And we're seeing a constellating set of decisions being made by our quote unquote leaders and decision makers at the monopoly utilities that are actually going to add more upward pressure on rates as opposed to less. And so people need to be engaged and track. And that brings us to the fundamental topic that we're talking about today, which is energy efficiency, which is a key way to help mitigate risk and manage bills, which is ultimately what you pay. So let's go to the next slide. So this is a complicated slide, but it actually conveys a very common sense reality. If you have a home that is energy efficient and tight and able to, because of its having invested in energy efficient technologies, hold its envelope in a way of integrity, you are going to have a both a healthier home and a home that can be more resilient. And what you see in the slide on the left, this is showing a period of temperature uh, extremes that happened. And the slide on the left, the orange slide, shows the black line is temperature swings over a series of days. The orange line is how the house was able to hold its envelope integrity so that it was less subject to exposure to the temperature extremes. When the colored lines dip down and interact with the black temperature lines, it actually exposes both the resident and things like water pipes and other things to temperature extremes. And what you see is moving from left to right is the more energy efficient, up to code, and using efficiency you have, you see that the colored band moves away and stays more stable away from the temperature, which means both the individual saving money, their home is more comfortable and healthy, and their home is more resilient because their home is not being pulled into the extremes. And if you lose power, which we know that a lot of people across the Southeast recently lost power, um, your home is more resilient to where you may not be experiencing uh, freezing pipes and other disruptions like that. So energy efficiency, at the very fundamental level, the cleanest, most efficient electron is the one you never use. But as you add energy efficiency to your home, it both saves you money, which helps with the affordability crisis. It makes your home more resilient, which makes you more able to deal with the weather extremes that we're experiencing. And energy efficiency is the best way to mitigate climate change because what it does is it decreases the amount of investment in fuels and technologies and other things that we have to do in order to provide energy. So it should be a prime objective of society to be energy efficient as possible. And yet when we interact with the utilities, we continually face an uphill battle and a real struggle to get the utilities to really focus on what should be a prime responsibility, which is to make everyone as energy efficient as possible. So, that is this sort of addressing the combined crisis and energy efficiency as a solution. And so with that, let me turn it over to, am I turning it over to Eddie next or Maggie?
I think Maggie's next at bat.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. A great way to start off talking about energy efficiency as one, but a very key tool when we're talking about these crises. So SACE has put out an energy efficiency report before. This is actually our seventh edition. And so we are really starting to see and be able to show trends across the region and over time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of generally what's in the report and some of our findings, and then we'll get into some utility specifics. So here's just a little bit of scope provided for what is in the report. So in this report, we are using the data from 2024. That's the latest full year of data that we have so far. We're looking at energy efficiency savings from utility programs. So if you or I go and buy a new refrigerator and it happens to be Energy Star, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about utility funded and directed programs. And we are calculating these sales as a percentage of retail sales. That's just so we can have something to show across various sizes of utilities to get a little bit closer to apples. We are focusing in on the southeast, so that is actually a little bit better shown in this slide where we're comparing the southeast to the rest of the region. So if you look and see that the little green outline there, that is the coverage for SACE. And it is somewhat different than this south region, although there are really large utilities in the southeast. And so they're really driving the trends that we see here, where we can compare regional averages. These are averages. This means there are folks above and below these averages within the region. Unfortunately, this is a trend we've seen in previous reports. This is not a new or unfortunately a change where the Southeast is absolutely bringing down our national average. The Southeast is at about 2.22% of savings as a percentage of retail sales. Midwest, Northeast, West are all at that about 0.7%. So you can see where our national average is, closer to that 0.5%. Obviously, the Southeast is the one bringing down the average for the country as a whole. All right, so here is a little bit of a look at Southeast states in particular. Just as with the country and with averages in general, we do see some variability there. We have some leaders and laggards. Obviously, North Carolina and South Carolina are de facto leaders in the Southeast, putting our U.S. average on there just to help folks see that all but one of the Southeast states as a statewide are below the U.S. average on energy efficiency savings as a percentage of electricity sold. One sort of helpful way to frame this as well is that we've heard a lot about load growth, specifically data centers, manufacturing, other kinds of load growth, people moving to the region. Utilities across our region are projecting load growth on the range of about 2 to 4% per year. So these savings levels are just a tiny drop in the bucket compared to the load growth that we are seeing. And one of the things that Steve mentioned is worth repeating, which is that energy efficiency can help not just participants, people that participate in the programs save on their bills, but it can lower the cost of for the whole utility because you have to build less power plants, you have to build smaller power plants to meet that load growth. If we can offset some of the load growth by reducing energy waste, that's what energy efficiency is, then we can all save moving forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eddie to talk about a few utility specifics.
Hey, y'all. Thank you very much, Steve and Maggie. Maggie for giving, I think, the kind of overview it's accessible to an audience that's not immersed in this stuff every day. You want to know kind of how your region's doing, how is your state doing, because that's where the political accountability is. But it really requires getting a little more granular to understand it because the state typically is not running a government or a statewide coordinated program. We're talking about programs that are usually implemented utility by utility, and it's the utility funded programs that are usually the most significant energy efficiency programs in the state. And so here we've broken it down not by state, but by utility company. And this is partly significant because the Southeast is home to some of the largest electric utility companies in the country. We don't always have the biggest states or the biggest population, but we've got some of the biggest utility companies. And examples, Duke Energy, Southern Company with its subsidiaries, Southern Power, Alabama Power, Mississippi Power, Dominion. Their Virginia territory is outside the scope of this report, but they have a utility in South Carolina as well and in other states. So these are, companies with typically over $50 billion in market cap. And if they want to weatherize some homes, they have the capability of doing it. And what you see here is Duke largely serving North Carolina, also the upper third of South Carolina. Duke Energy Carolinas in progress. Those are two side-by-side utilities serving those two states, is up around the average of a large utility company nationwide. And so our best performer regionally is an average utility nationally. And one reason that is significant is because people in the Southeast typically have significantly larger electric bills than other parts of the country because they use a lot more electricity. They're more likely to have electric heat, and there's a bigger air conditioning load. And so the lost opportunity of not exceeding national leadership or not even meeting national averages is a very large opportunity in terms of cost and quality of life. So moving down from Duke, we see Tampa Electric, a municipal utility. We see Georgia Power, Dominion, Mississippi Power. Really, everything except Duke is at half the national average or less, roughly. So that's not the story we want to tell. But let's go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to drill in a little bit on Duke because I think there's some interesting lessons here. So first of all, you see that they've maintained a similar level of savings for the last 5 years. And that would go back even beyond that if we had more charts. And that grew out of a commitment they made when Duke underwent a merger to try to save 1% a year. And they reached a significant percentage of that goal. So it can be done in our jurisdiction. Another interesting thing to note here, you'll see in the legend, there's blue is savings for residential customers, red is for commercial customers, and yellow is for industrial customers. But if you look at the bar chart, there basically is no industrial. This is true in Duke territory and in across Georgia and South Carolina, that the industrial sector, which is a very significant energy consuming sector in the Southeast, is largely left out of the energy efficiency programs. There's some TVA is doing a little bit. There's a little bit at Dominion, but by and large, we're sort of fighting with one hand behind our back because we've left out some of the biggest energy users that have some of the cheapest energy savings available. Another thing to draw from this Duke slide, you see Duke has subsidiaries in the Carolinas, but also in Florida. And Duke is clearly capable of delivering significant energy efficiency savings, but what you're seeing in their Florida subsidiary is very little is going on. That's the difference that state regulators make. That's the difference that the regulatory environment and expectations make. And we would rather see the Carolinas type performance and above across the whole Southeast than, unfortunately, what we see is this Florida type performance in Florida and in other parts of the Southeast. So let's look at the next slide, please. This is Dominion, South Carolina. Dominion's other subsidiary in Virginia has committed to significantly higher levels of savings. In the case of Dominion, South Carolina, back before Dominion bought it, it was called South Carolina Electric and Gas. And they requested approval to build a nuclear plant back around 2008. And at that time, kind of in conjunction with that, they laid out a plan to grow to 0.75 or 0.8% energy savings, and they never fully implemented that plan. They mostly bumped around about half that level, and that's roughly what they're doing now. I think in the last year, we're seeing some signs of improvement. You see the tiny amount of industrial savings that I referenced a minute ago there in the yellow, but it's basically performing at or below half of the level of other large utilities nationwide. And I want to just say briefly, I'm not trying to be critical of the people at the public utility companies that are executing these programs. They are typically among the most knowledgeable people in energy efficiency in the state, and they are doing what they can within the budget and the level of corporate and regulatory support that they can. So we've got some good teams of people that can do a lot more with the right support. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Here's Southern Company. Southern Company, of course, is a giant utility company. And Georgia Power there you see with a performance record similar to Dominion, South Carolina, kind of half or less than half the national average. Mississippi Power even less, despite I know a lot of efforts in Mississippi going back even before 2010 to try to get significant utility efficiency programs going, and really nothing going on in Alabama Power, just about nothing. Southern Company we were, I think, hoping that this would be kind of a celebratory 7th edition to talk about Georgia Power, because Southern Company committed about 3 years ago that they were going to submit and support a portfolio of programs that would save 0.75%. So they would join Duke, possibly even exceed Duke as a regional leader in energy efficiency. But when it came down to it, they backed out of that promise. And that we see within the last year, and the commission let them do that. And so that's what we see here, is that continued low level of performance, even after the promise to do better. And so we were quite disappointed in that. So I think we'll go on to the next slide, and I will hand it off to Maggie.
All right. Thank you, Eddie. I am unfortunately taking us to the largest utility in Florida, and actually the largest utility in the country, and talking about how disappointing Florida Power and Light is on energy efficiency. So as you can see, we're using the same axes for all of these charts so that you get an idea of how the savings compare across these utilities. With the high mark being 1%, which we see utilities across the country well exceed that 1% level, but obviously we don't have any in the Southeast. And so, without adjusting the axes here, Florida Power and Light's savings are barely visible and have been for a long time. So the largest IOU in the country is 14 times lower than the average of all the large IOUs across the country on energy efficiency. And this is in part a an issue with FPLs. I mean, they're obviously making decisions, and if they wanted to lead on energy efficiency, could, but it's also absolutely a reflection of the policy in the state of Florida, both driven by the state legislature, and then, of course, the utility regulators, which are the Florida Public Service Commissioners. And then another very large utility in our region, not an IOU. This one is a federally owned utility. The largest public power entity in the country is the Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA. They have also historically had dismal results of their energy efficiency savings. Their claim was that they weren't seeing load growth, and so energy efficiency did not make sense. We do have a tick up in 2024 that they reached 0.14%, which for them is definitely an improvement. And we have some changes in the rhetoric from TVA leadership. That is the previous CEO did make some announcements that indicated a potential shift towards energy efficiency, some investments in energy efficiency programs, some new programs. But anybody that's been, paying attention to TVA over the last year or so knows that there's been some pretty significant political upheaval. They have a new CEO. Several board members were fired, and actually just this morning they had their first board meeting with the new Trump-appointed folks on the board, and they're clearly taking the utility in a different direction. There was no mention of energy efficiency in that board meeting, and so we have not heard that they are not going to continue this momentum for more energy efficiency savings, but we will have to see what the future holds with them. So that is, those are the main utilities that we are going to cover in the webinar today. I do encourage you to take a look at the report. There are additional, stats for other utilities in there, as well as we actually have an appendix that you can download that has all of the data for even some of the, smaller or very small co-ops and munis across the region. I'm going to talk a little bit more, and then we will do some Q&A. So be sure you're getting the questions in the Q&A box. So one thing we wanted to highlight in both the report and the webinar is an update on some federal funding for energy efficiency. There were a few different ways that the Inflation Reduction Act made funding available for energy efficiency. One is the Home Efficiency Rebate, or HER, that's a program for whole home energy efficiency, which is really meant to significantly lower home energy use with a target of at least 20% reduction in usage. So these are programs that are actually making a difference. And all of the states in the Southeast did apply and have applications approved. But there have been delays in getting obligated funds, and so far only Georgia and North Carolina have programs up and running. We have a little bit more about that in the report, and here's a table to show some of the impacts. These are the impacts as they have been updating on the state pages. So this is not as of like this morning. It's not necessarily being updated in real time. I think those North Carolina numbers weren't updated since about September or October of last year. So hopefully they're doing a lot more in the meantime. So what do we do about all this? This has been a lot of information, not all of it incredibly sunny. But I will say that wanting to end with the fact that most of these utilities are investor-owned utilities. They're private companies with obligations to shareholders, as well as to, regulators. And so they're not necessarily going to do energy efficiency on their own. It is fundamentally against their business model where, they prove to their regulator that they can build more stuff so they can earn a profit on all that stuff. So that means that there is a need for policy to fill the gap. Most of our utilities are regulated at the state level. And so that means state legislatures and utility regulators. That's a utilities commission or a public service commission. Those are the folks that need to set targets and hold utilities to targets on energy efficiency. Again, to come back to what Steve was saying, to address these crises we're seeing, reduce emissions that lead to climate change, reduce people's bills, and make everybody more resilient. And this is especially important amid uncertainty at the federal level for our state level folks to really step up and make sure that utilities are taking energy efficiency as seriously as they do other parts of the utility operations. So with that, here is some contact information for Eddie and myself, and we will turn it over for Q&A.
Thank you, Maggie, Eddie, and Steve. It's a lot of great information there, and we've had some fantastic questions rolling in. So let's get started. First question is from Zach at WFAE, couple related to the Carolinas here. One, are you seeing a lot of activity from public utilities and local co-ops? Are there examples of hyperlocal programs in the Carolinas? And then along with that, can you zoom in on some specific programs offered by Duke in the Carolinas and how they've improved energy use?
I can take some of that if you want, Maggie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Duke has for businesses, there is a program, a commercial, what they call prescriptive program, meaning that there's a prescribed rebate for each of different types of equipment, such as lighting or more efficient motors or commercial cooking equipment. There's also a custom program. So if you're doing something to a commercial facility to make it much more efficient, they will work with you to estimate the energy savings and give you a rebate based on that. So that's in the commercial sector. Duke also has a program that works with builders that are building new housing and makes those homes much more efficient from the start. Of course, most housing is not new housing, it's existing housing. And Duke has several programs that deal with existing housing, including multifamily structures and single family structures. And they have programs that will, and this is true of Georgia Power and Dominion as well, that will give rebates for more efficient air conditioners and heat pumps and hot water heaters as well. I would say call out in particular, if your hot water heater goes out, check out the heat pump hot water heaters and the rebates for heat pump hot water heaters because they will use dramatically less electricity. I'll call out one more thing, and this is true for Duke in both Carolinas and in Dominion. About 2 years ago, pursuant to a legal settlement that we reached with them, they began a pilot program to identify highly efficient low-income homes and weatherize those homes and get really significant energy savings at those homes. So those programs are not very large relative to the whole state yet, but it's our hope that they will expand and that they'll improve the numbers we've been talking about today for all of those utilities.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. I think to the question about public utilities and local co-ops, either in the Carolinas or beyond, you can first off, they're all included in our appendix that's included with the report, so please do check that out. And I think that, especially from the sense of co-ops and municipal utilities, it really depends on the local leadership. We see a lot of variability, and there are a number of co-ops across the region that are doing, little to nothing on energy efficiency, even though we see some of these rural areas served by co-ops having some of the highest energy burdens, energy burden being the percentage of income being spent on energy. So, with that, I think there are a few highlights, especially I know of a few municipal utilities that have had good low income weatherization programs. Here in Knoxville, we had a program a while back that the utility got some funds from actually an EPA settlement that they had to use on weatherization, and that ended up being, having a big impact. Steve, I can't see you
Yeah, can I
want to
just
weigh
add,
in?
just one little interesting tidbit about particularly co-ops, but also munis. Um, I think it is many times forgotten that the whole notion of a co-op is that if you are a customer, you in essence own part of the co-op. And therefore, you have every right to go to the co-op leadership and have an engagement with them as a part owner and a customer. And if you can organize other folks in the co-op service territory to do that, you do have more power as opposed to, say, trying to go up against an investor-owned utility who tends to focus more on private power and shareholder value. So I encourage people to remember that are in the public power model that they kind of have an obligation more to you than, and you have more of a voice. And then many of the munis you can engage even through local government types of things. So don't lose sight of that in your thinking about it because co-ops could be low-hanging fruit for organizing.
If I could add a little bit to that. So a lot of these co-ops are individual, rural electric cooperatives. They have a territory, service territory, and they have typically far fewer customers than the IOUs. I mean, it could be 3,000 customers, it could be 100,000, but somewhere in that range as opposed to millions like Duke and Georgia Power. So there can be questions of economies of scale and program administration. They may need to work together some. They don't always have to be pushed. I know one example, the Ouachita Rural Electric Cooperative in Arkansas developed a bunch of programs and started implementing them and found it to be cost effective for the co-op itself because it had to buy power to resell to its members and it was paying a lot on peak. So it helped the customers reduce their peak and the co-op itself came out ahead financially. So there can be a real alignment of financial interests when the management takes this on and tries to figure it out.
Okay, let's move to a couple questions about energy efficiency and data center load growth. Mary Ellen with Bloomberg and Elizabeth with Canary Media both had good questions here. Are you seeing any regulators emphasize improved efficiency standards amid the rush to build data centers? It seems that years of downplaying efficiency policy to justify generation growth is no longer needed. And in tandem with that, given the new paradigm and massive load growth ahead from data centers and the like, how do you weigh the values of advocating more efficiency versus stemming some of that load growth? The phrase drop in the bucket was used. I wonder if you could talk more about that.
Yeah, I'll start out, but since I used that drop in the bucket phrase, I'll explain what I meant by that. And what I meant by that is that if energy efficiency is going to be used to stem some of the load growth that utilities are projecting, we need to do more than we have been doing. It can't be business as usual. So if we just keep doing, if the utilities keep doing what they have been doing, and we have results like we saw in these 2024 numbers, they're not going to have a huge impact on the load growth. So utilities that are seeing 2 to 4% load growth and are doing less than 0.1% energy efficiency savings, um, that is that's what I mean by drop in the bucket, and that is an opportunity for them to increase their savings um, to again offset some, maybe not all, of that load growth. It'll vary utility to utility and also how much of that data center load growth actually shows up. And I will also just say when we're thinking about kind of what we advocate for or against, it's not, I mean, energy efficiency has always been and will continue to be a key part of that, clean energy portfolio. Whether there's, huge load growth or quote unquote regular load growth or whatever. It is, a part of that moving forward. So I don't see it as a sort of decision between one or the other. It's a key piece of the puzzle. And oh, I will say the first question was about regulators emphasizing improved efficiency standards. One thing that's at top of mind because of the last question too, is that the head of Middle Tennessee Electric Co-op, which is one of the largest co-ops in the country, did testify in front of the Tennessee state legislature. And he was a lead, he's a leader of a co-op, and he was saying that energy efficiency is needed, especially to deal with load growth. So there are folks that recognize this, and hopefully the state legislators and the commissioners are recognizing that as well. Eddie or Steve, did y'all
I'll
weigh
just add, briefly that we're seeing something that's new in the energy efficiency space. The data center industry is not monolithic. Some of them have some bright ideas, and some of the leaders want to help fund energy efficiency for other customers. And that we haven't seen that from other industries in the past, and that's an opportunity that we hope to be able to help further develop. Takes a little regulatory problem solving, but it could have a significant impact.
Thanks, Maggie and Eddie. And I think there was another question specifically about if there are any meaningful updates in 2025-26 for specific energy efficiency requirements from public utility commissions or state legislators in southern states. I don't know if there's anything specific there that you want to add or waiting to see.
Unfortunately, not a lot. I don't know if you want to
Nobody has, for instance, set an accountability target, which most states across the country have in one form or the other, but the Southeast doesn't. Southeastern states haven't chosen to do that. But the little update I gave earlier about the pilot programs on weatherization, that's real time expanding now. Was just an idea 2 years ago.
That's
Yeah,
great.
and I'll just talk about what might come in 2026. So, well, in 2025, there was an opportunity for the Georgia Commission to set an energy efficiency target for Georgia Power. They had agreed a few years ago as part of the Vogel settlement for all the cost overruns to energy efficiency target of 0.75%. And then Georgia Power turned around in their IRP in 2025, and the commission agreed to do away with that target. And so that was a missed opportunity for sure. I think that another opportunity is in the IRPs in North and South Carolina. Duke is doing their carbon plan / IRP right now that could include an energy efficiency. That's a place where the commission could push for more energy efficiency. And then in South Carolina, first Dominion, then Santee Cooper, and then also Duke will have IRPs. In Integrated Resource Plan is an IRP. Unfortunately, Florida is a energy efficiency policy desert, which is a term I guess I just came up with. But they set targets every 5 years. They tend to be pretty low. And we're not going to be in a year for target setting in Florida in 2026.
Great, thank you. Couple questions. Let's jumping maybe to some state-specific questions. One here from Zach at WFAE, and Michelle at WSOC is also asking about the her and here programs, home energy rebate, home efficiency rebates. Zach's asking, why is North Carolina's home efficiency rebates program lagging so far behind Georgia? And then Michelle, who's in South Carolina, is asking, have other states in the Southeast made moves to launch their here home and homes programs? Have some missed the opportunity to get this federal funding?
I'll say on the North Carolina numbers, that is, I think, as of September of last year. And so uh, you can we can reach out to Zach offline too. But there is a homepage that they're updating, and so I would say keep checking that homepage and see how they're doing. Um, and the other one was, oh, have the other states lost the opportunity? I don't believe so. I think that's still kind of an unknown question. Um, they still have existing plans in place, that they developed for this funding. And so my hope is that that does not go to waste. I don't know, Eddie, if you have something to add to that.
Yeah, I think that the time lag thing is just kind of speed to implement. Georgia jumped out there first. North
Mhm.
Carolina came a little later, and they typically the first few months only serve a limited geographic area just to get the kinks out of the program and then open it to the whole state. So it's only within the last day or two that North Carolina has made it statewide. So that's probably why they're lagging in numbers behind Georgia. And neither one, frankly, if you think of the number of people, 10 million people in each state, neither one have really reached scale yet. So one number may look bigger than the other, but I don't even think that's really that significant yet.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. Specific question about Florida, and then a question about plug-in solar too, but what would Florida utilities need to do to improve their efficiency rankings?
Uh, they need a state policy. They need the Florida policy is called FECA, FEECA. I can't even remember what that stands for off the top of my head. It's in the report, and it hasn't been updated since the 1980s, I believe. So Florida needs state policy with some kind of, something in there to drive energy efficiency, either a better way to set targets. I mean, they could move towards having an actual integrated resource plan for utilities that would include modeling of energy efficiency, because they do not even have IRPs in Florida.
Yeah, and I would just add FECA, Florida Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. You know, let's be honest, the regulatory environment in Florida is pretty captured, and therefore we don't really see uh, a lot of leadership from the commission in nudging the utilities in the right direction. And we're not seeing any leadership out of Tallahassee in the legislature, the political space. So, I think Maggie's new coined term, a energy efficiency desert, completely applies in Florida because there's no leadership. There's no leadership from the utilities, really. There's no leadership from the regulatory entities. There's no leadership from the political entities in Tallahassee, and it's just completely dead in the water. And there's been a number of runs, in trying to engage constructively and proactively because there's mechanisms in North Carolina where the utility gets kind of incentivized to do energy efficiency, and we've actually tried to you know bring those kind of incentives into the Florida market, and the Florida utilities are lukewarm to non-interested. And so It's just really been a stalled environment for now, a decade or more.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say a little more to the nuts and bolts, like we've talked about the political ways and means, but there are a number of specialty companies around the US that if a utility company wants to implement a program, it can contract it out to them and they swoop in and like train people and implement the program. So feasibility is not really the question. It's interest and will.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks, Steve. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you both. Question here about plug-in solar. What's the state of plug-in solar among the states in our region? Which states, if any, are pursuing legislation, and which utilities or local power providers, if any, are amenable to it?
Well, I'll lead off on that. We're very bullish on plug-in solar, which is also kind of known as balcony solar in Europe and Germany and other places. The technology is there. I'm using it. I'm in touch with a number of people across, our organization that are using it in various areas. We are aware of a handful of local power companies in the TVA area that are actually allowing their customers to use it. We're also aware of some who are not favorable towards it, so that is still a sort of a work in progress. Um, there is a lot of discussion about it. South Carolina seems to be the first state in the region to actually propose legislation. There's been legislation passed in Utah that set a pretty good standard on what could be followed by a Republican legislator, Raymond Ward, there in Utah, that has set that up. And there's probably now a dozen to 15 other states across the United States that are actively looking at legislation. But I would say right now, only South Carolina has actually taken the formal step of proposing something. So, and it's appropriate to ask that question here because in many ways, plug-in solar is almost like an energy efficient appliance. You just plug it in and it kind of, it's usually in the 400, 800 to 1200 watt kind of range. So it's like potentially offsetting an appliance. Remember that your high speed, hair blowers, right? 1600 watts or something like that. So just to put it in sort of terms, but you can plug it in and it just goes all the time when the sun's up, and it's really easy and it's relatively low cost. And SACE is actually working with interested parties. We have access to low cost plug-in solar equipment, and so if you're interested in it, you can reach out to us, and we'd be happy to share with you our group learning. And we've actually recently hired somebody to be sort of working in the what's called the DER, distributed energy resource space, and they're going to be, sort of really locking in on this. And so we'll have more to report. And stay tuned to our solar report, which comes out in the summer, because that's sort of a technology that kind of has a foot in both of these camps.
Great, thanks, Steve. And that may have answered another related question to that is, do any of the utilities provide rebates for small scale solar, either balcony or plug-in, due to peak demand reductions they would provide? And
I would say the answer is no. I mean, there's a lot of education going on with Southeast utility folks about plug-in solar, and so I think we're still in early days there.
Yeah, I mean, Duke does have a power pair, although the future of that program is yet to be determined. That's more traditional rooftop solar and batteries. And so I think we're seeing an interest from utilities as they seem to struggle more and more with their winter peaks and seeing incentives for battery storage. And guess what really helps with winter peaks? Very efficient homes. because the Southeast has a lot of electric resistance heating, and that is what drives those really high winter peaks.
Great, thank you. Specific question here about Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress. SACE calculates DEC and DEP 2024 savings as a percentage of retail sales at 0.74% and 0.61% respectively. In Duke Carolina's collaborative slides from September 2025, the companies report those figures at 1.4% and 1.1% respectively. Can you please explain the discrepancies in these calculations?
Yes, they use a different denominator. If we all remember our fifth grade math with fractions, we get percentages or fractions with a numerator and a denominator. The denominator is what you are dividing by. Duke divides its savings by its sales and does not include any sales to opt-out customers. So as Eddie mentioned when he was talking about the Duke slide, they opt out a number of industrial customers. And so they are not counting some pretty large customers and a good chunk of sales when they're dividing their savings by their sales. And that's how they get to a higher percentage. We use the, actual total retail sales to make the calculation.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Question from Kat here. What do you see as the most effective best practice mechanisms to hold utilities accountable for achieving their energy efficiency targets?
I have some thoughts on that. The most typical around the country regulatory approach is to set some kind of target so you have an expectation to measure achievement by, and then also to have a financial reward, and in some cases, a penalty for either exceeding the target or coming in below the target. And so I spent a number of years with the regulatory body in the state of Arkansas, and we set a target. It went to about 0.75% initially and rose up to a little over 1%. And what we said is if the utility company hits that target, obviously they essentially get a bonus. They can't get any bonus if they fall below 80% of the target, and they get an extra bonus if they're over, say, 110% of the target. So we made a kind of carrot and stick risk reward system that was centered around a target. And there are a lot of different ways you can calculate what the target is or what the incentive should be, but that's the basic accountability tool.
Yeah, I agree with that. Make it about how they make money. Utilities respond well to financial incentives.
Thanks for that. Another question here from David, and I think we're nearing the end of our hour, but are there any municipal-owned utilities across the region that have stronger efficiency programs in place that are producing tangible results? And are there any examples of municipalities setting EE standards on LPCs, local power corporations, companies?
I don't know of any municipal utilities, especially the LPCs as local power companies is the term used typically in TVA. And I don't know of any local like governments that have set energy efficiency targets for their municipal utility. I think that would be welcome. In TVA territory, even though customers are served by the municipal or co-op utilities, TVA administers the energy efficiency programs, which helps with something Eddie was talking about earlier. Some of these are pretty small utilities, and it would be a lot for them to do it themselves. But the LPCs, the municipal and co-op utilities, have to opt into TVA's programs and then kind of implement them. We have seen some of the larger municipal utilities in TVA do energy efficiency a little bit more on their own and stand up some of their own programs. Some examples of this include Huntsville Utilities has done quite a lot of good work on getting heat pump mini splits, installed throughout their system. And Memphis utility MLG&W with their Share the Pennies program has done quite a bit to weatherize homes before even TVA started their home energy uplift program. And now that TVA has that program, TVA matches some of the dollars that MLGW puts towards low income weatherization. So I think those are effective programs. I think, again, most of the municipal programs I've seen have been around that low income. And I would love to see a good example of a utility setting, sort of broader energy efficiency targets.
Fantastic. Well, I think we are at our hour. Thank you, Maggie, Eddie, and Steve, and thank everyone for joining us today. It's really important, and we really appreciate you all taking the time out today to join our webinar. Again, we will share the recording after we get that posted, and along with links to the report and resources. If you have any questions that were not answered, you can reply to that email, and we'll do our best to answer those. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Thanks, y'all.